Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us this evening. We're really pleased to have you here. This is our second webinar in conjunction with England Hockey. And today we're going to be talking about how much does upgrading to sports LED lighting cost. So before we get started, just a little bit of webinar protocol. So everybody is muted apart from the panelists, but you can talk to us in the chat bar. And we also have the Q&A function enabled. So if you have any questions we're going through, please put them into the Q&A section and we'll answer them as we go along, or we've also got some time at the end for questions. We will send out a follow-up email after the webinar, or probably likely tomorrow morning, with a link to this recording so you can re-watch it, or you can send it on to any colleagues who this may be useful to. And we're also going to include a link to the previous webinar that we've done with England Hockey, because we do reference it a little bit during this presentation and it may be useful for you. There's also going to be a couple of resources mentioned during the presentation, and there'll be all of the links plus a little document included in that follow-up email. And at the very end of the webinar, when you exit, there's a very quick survey. We'd just like to know if there are any other topics that you'd like us to cover. Brilliant. So our agenda today. So first, we're going to do some quick introductions to our presenters and a little bit about Midstream lighting for those of you who don't know us. And then we'll go into the main presentation where we talk about how much does LED floodlighting cost. So we're going to start off talking about retrofits and what those costs look like and the expected payback periods you'd expect to see. And then we'll move on to new builds. And again, we'll talk about what does that cover, what costs can you expect? And then we'll also do a quick little section on funding and ideas for self-funding. And then at the very end, we'll take any questions that we haven't covered during the webinar. So first off, my name's Sophie and I work in marketing here at Midstream Lighting, and I'm really pleased to be your host today. Next up is my colleague, Sam. Sam, would you like to introduce yourself to everyone, please?
Thanks, Sophie. Hi, everyone. I hope we're all doing well this evening, and thank you for joining us. As Sophie mentioned, my name's Sam, and I'm a sales executive here at Midstream Lighting. So I've been with Midstream for just over 2 years, and I've been in the sports lighting industry for just over 8 years as well. So one of my main roles at Midstream is involves helping clubs like yourself with obviously their hockey lighting solutions, and this is from the very early stages. So initial surveys, budget quotations, up until installation and completion of the floodlighting project. I predominantly cover the north of the UK, so anything from Nottingham upwards, I'd be your point of contact. That's about it from me on this section, so I'll pass you over to Simon at England Hockey.
Hi everyone, welcome. Simon Dowdy, Facilities Development Manager for the East Midlands, the East and London. And I'll pass you over to Joe.
Hi, welcome all. I'm the other half of the current facilities team at the moment. My area is the southwest, the south central area, and southeast. And between Simon and I, we're currently covering the northern part of the country while we're looking to find a replacement for a previous colleague. So welcome all to the webinar this evening.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Joe. So welcome to all our panelists and all of you watching. So next off, for those of you who don't know us, we're Midstream Lighting. We're an LED lighting manufacturer and solutions provider. We work in 3 key sectors, so sports, so everything from hockey pitches to your big stadiums to your grassroots football pitches. And then we also work in 2 other areas, so airports and maritime terminals. And we've been doing this since 2010. Our products are made for the applications that they are used in. So we're specialists, not generalists. So that means that we don't just make one floodlight that we use across all applications. So you wouldn't see our sports floodlight in a car park or an airport. Those products are manufactured just for those applications. And all of our products are designed in-house and manufactured by us. And we don't just make products, we also offer a full solution. So that's everything from design at the beginning, to obviously consultation around if you may need planning applications, anything like that. We can help you look at finance options, if there's any funding out there, and then obviously delivering the project and any after sales afterwards. Our overall ethos as a business is to not just be a manufacturer, but really to be a thought leader. And we do that through educating our customers with webinars like this. We have a big knowledge hub with lots of articles on there talking about different issues, and we really are here to help and inform the customer. And why we're here today is that we are the official lighting partner of England Hockey, and we have been for the last 2 years. And we've been working together on over 28 different hockey pitches across England. And obviously, we hope to do more in the future. So now I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Sam. Sam, over to you.
Thanks again, Sophie. So how much do hockey floodlights cost? I'm sure that's a question you're all dying to know the answer to. To be honest, the cost can vary quite a bit from project to project, whether that be the key main areas that we look at in terms of retrofits or new installs. Fortunately, Sophie has created a quick poll for you, so we can find out a bit more of your needs and what everyone is on this webinar, and hopefully it'll highlight some key areas later on the presentation. Sophie, yeah, that's fine, thank you.
Brilliant. So a poll should have popped up on your screen now. We'd just like to know a little bit about you, if you're looking at maybe a training pitch or a full-size hockey pitch, if you already have lights and you're looking to upgrade, or maybe you don't have any lights at all and you're looking for a new installation. So I'm just going to give you another minute. I can see people starting to vote already. Fantastic. Brilliant. Okay. Just going to give you another 30 seconds to vote for anyone who hasn't. Okay. Brilliant. So as we thought, the majority of you already currently have floodlights and you're looking to upgrade to LED. Some of you have training pitches, but the majority of you have a full-sized hockey pitch. Thank you very much. And Sam, back over to you.
Thanks again, Sophie. So as I mentioned on the previous slide, we typically categorize the projects into the new installs and the retrofits, and judging by the results, all of you are looking to do a retrofit, which makes this next slide very relevant. As you can see, for the retrofit projects, again, as I mentioned, the project price can vary quite a bit. There's a number of key reasons why that can be. So one is a facility size. So even though the majority of you for the full, or all of you for the full size pitch will have the same size pitch, it may be that that pitch is within a football pitch and the masts are further back, so you need more floodlights to get those levels, etc. The main reason is obviously the lux levels. So for typically you'll be looking at 350 lux up to 500, which some of you may have as well. That can obviously create a bit of a range between the pricing because you'll need more fittings for the higher levels. There's also the televised option, which is 500 lux plus, which I don't think will apply to too many of you on here. And that very much is a project by project basis. So things like your Commonwealth Games, major hockey events, things like that. But it is something to take into consideration and something that we can offer as a business. Sophie, if you could go on to the next slide, and I'll give a bit more insight as to where those costs come from. So retrofits, what they look like, and basically what do they involve? So a retrofit, we refer to it as a ground up project. So what that means is we treat everything from the base of the mast upwards. So the fittings themselves, the cable, the existing gear, so your ballast, your igniters, your capacitors, your lamps, everything that you're constantly having to spend money on changing, we come in, we replace. So a common misconception is that like a home light, so if you were at home, you put in an LED bulb, you've got an LED light, you're cutting your energy savings by half or even more in some cases. Whereas with sports lighting, you don't just change a bulb, it's the actual fitting itself. So the head that you've got on the top of the mast, we'd look to come in and remove that, replace it with our LED module or our LED fitting. Then, as I mentioned, replacing the cable that runs up from the base of the mast to the new fitting, or the existing gear. And then optional, what can add to pricing and whatnot is control systems. So as with LEDs, you actually have the option to dim the system. So if you are training, you can reduce the energy consumption or even cut the pitch in half and thirds. So even though it is another additional cost up front, that control system can really help bring costs down in the long term. And with our solutions, All the prices include the final Luxor evaluation. So to make sure your system's in line with the FIH and England Hockey guidance. And with our solution, I'm proud to say that we offer the only FIH certified solution on the market. It also includes all the electrical testing and whatnot, as all our electricians are fully qualified. Sophie, if you can go on to the next slide, there's a bit more on the retrofits and what to consider. So as you can see, there's considerations both for electrically and reusing the masts. I did mention on the previous slide that we do treat it as a ground up, but not everyone has a perfect system that's working currently. There may be something with your distribution board. There may be something going out that you're not happy with, a switching area, something like that. We can look at that for you. As I mentioned, all of our electricians are fully qualified, so we can do the back of house stuff as well. The main thing that we get asked and the main consideration is reusing your existing masts. So typically a mast would say lasts to 25 years. A lot of the time they last longer than that, but it is a major concern because you don't want to be spending X amount on new lighting to have to be replacing the mast in 5 years. So what we do suggest and what we can offer as a company is a NDT test, which is a non-destructive test. So we'd come to site prior to any installations and we'd basically check the welds at the base of the mast, ensure there's no rust, check the foundation bolts with ultrasound testing, and also the concrete pads themselves, just to make sure you're fully covered moving forward and there's going to be no headaches in 4, 5, 6, 7 years down the line, whatever it may be. Speaking of 4 to 5 years, so if you could go back on or go on to the next slide, and there's a bit on payback periods. So another question that I'm sure you're all dying to know the answer to as well is the payback periods for the LED upgrades. Most of you, if not all of you, are looking at the LED upgrade to reduce costs. So what we say is an average is 4 to 5 years. That's just on the electricity. If you include your maintenance, obviously that payback period can come down. It does vary from club to club because you're not all paying the same electrical or electricity rate, and you're not all using the pitch for the same amount of time each evening or each week, whatever it may be. A real life example that we have and was on the previous webinar that Sophie will send out is at Telford and Wrexham Hockey Club. So they reduced their energy by 48%, but with that, they actually increased the number of sessions. So without the increased sessions, they'd be talking about 53% savings. And even with the sessions, they're still talking a payback period of 4 to 5 years. Obviously, it's not all just about the payback period as well. It's not like the lights that you have at the moment that every 3, 5 years you're having to make replacements. With Midstream, we offer a 10-year warranty. So once that payback period is seen, you're going to still be reaping the rewards later on in the product life and later on in your system's lifespan. So you're talking 10 years plus for the fittings themselves, and that will give you 6, 7, 8 years, if not more, of being able to reinvest those savings back into the club in other areas. So I think that's about it on the retrofit area, to be honest. If you could go on to the new builds, and I'll briefly touch on that, because I know there's not, or I don't believe there's any of the guys in here have actually put that in on the poll. But just a brief overview for when this goes out after. The new build systems, as you can imagine, are quite a bit more expensive than the retrofits. So, and that is because they involve all the aspects of the retrofit, so the new fittings, new cable, drivers, etc. But they also involve a lot of extra stuff. So installation of the masts, creation of the concrete pads, the groundworks. This can vary if it's a soft dig, hard dig. And then you've also got that option of the wiring and the control system that you could look at as well. So again, it varies. And there, as you'll see, there's quite a big margin between the 45k and the 95k compared to the 26 and the 56 earlier on. And then we've got the same where we offer the new installs for televised solutions. But again, it's very few and far between in a project by project basis. Sophie, if you want to go on to the next slide, and I think the guys from England Hockey can touch on some funding options.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much, Sam. That was really useful. So Simon, Joe,
Yep.
if you want to take over and just talk through the funding options that are available.
Okay, so when we're talking about funding, I'll just give a brief overview of the landscape at the moment. I'm sure all of you are aware of financial situations at the moment, and that has had some implications on certainly grant funding. So during Sport England used to have a grant fund called the Community Asset Fund. During COVID, that was frozen and was transferred into an emergency fund to support sports facilities. They are still working on what the fund that is going to replace that. They have said that there's going to be a fund to replace it. We don't know what that is at the moment. They haven't announced anything, but as soon as they do announce something, then obviously we can let our clubs and partners know. But what they do have at the moment, Sport England, is they have small grants fund, which is up to £15,000. Now, normally this isn't on capital spend, but they have introduced 2 extra areas to reflect King Charles's passions, as they call it, and one of those is sustainability. Therefore, LED lighting falls within that. So there is the option of £15,000 up to that onto that. Obviously, there's conditions, and they would want to see what the benefits are for their fund. The other thing that the other area that they are supporting quite heavily at the moment is crowdfunding. So they've partnered with crowdfunding, and they will match fund up to £10,000 on any crowdfunding that the clubs can make. And this is perfect timing for today, because I've just learned that they have a webinar tomorrow at 12 noon. It's a monthly webinar, and it just happens to be coming along tomorrow, 12 noon, so that you could, if you are available, you could find more out about crowdfunding. The next area would be local authorities. So local authorities, they have developer contributions in two different ways. It's either Section 106 funding or the Community Infrastructure Levy, so the SIL funding. Those 2 pots, they are basically the same. They are both monies that that local authorities raise through development. It's just they're spent in a different way, and you just need to check with your local authority which fund they apply. It is very much council led and local authority led. So if you have got plans, what I would recommend is that you actually get in contact with the council and share with the leisure department and share the your vision and your aims to upgrade your lights. So they're 2 funds that they have. And there are also carbon neutral funds. Most councils have that. It's European funding. Most councils have it. Again, check, because it's very, very local. Some local authorities have already had to spend and allocate their funds, but there are still areas of the country that you can access it. But again, that's a quick search on the local authority website. Joe, do you want to have a go?
Hi, welcome all. Mine's quite quick. Many of these you've probably already heard of or have tried to access funding before. Landfill, like Viola and Suez, generally have a community fund that could be accessible to most clubs. Always check throughout all of these, definitely check with the eligibility of the criteria. Obviously, this is a bit of a broad brush. Every site, every facility is very, very different, but it just gives you a bit of taster of some of the bits and funding pots that are out there. Landfill generally have, it depends, landfill recycling centres generally have a postcode checker on their website, which will then instantly tell you whether it's worth your eligibility, whether or not you're in a certain distance, so therefore you'll be able to then continue with the application. So it can be quite quick. In terms of whether you're eligible or not. So, but definitely check if you are definitely within like a 20-mile radius. A lot of them do kind of cover that area, that span. Commercial loans, again, is probably going to be for the few, very much around asset owning facilities, those that could be eligible to take on a loan, especially something like a charitable loan through the charity bank. And then localized funding pots. So I think there's somebody on here from an active partnership who we've worked with before. I won't name and shame her, but been a wonderful support to not only the club but us in terms of signposting as to available funding pots to help specifically in this case with sports lighting on a pitch. So active partnerships do have that local knowledge. Many of their websites have access to very small pots of funding. But I think, as Simon's mentioned, in this day and age around the funding landscape, there isn't going to be a one-source solution to getting you over the finishing line with a project of this scale. So I think it is small bite chunks here and there of funding if you can get it. I do know in the Southwest, we've had a successful application through Morrison's. Again, slightly maybe, you know, off at a tangent, but they were happy to support some a retrofit solution on a pitch in the Southwest. So again, it's definitely worth exploring and getting to know your local contacts and networks, and the active partnerships is certainly there to help you do that. But again, eligibility varies, so it's not going to be a solution for everybody. There is a funding sheet that we have at England Hockey that we just try and update, and I believe Sophie will include that on the email, the follow-up email as well, that will just either give you some links to some of these that we've mentioned, and also there might be some more on there that that you know could be appropriate for your project.
Yeah, so as Joe says, in the follow-up email, we'll include that sheet with all those links. There'll also be a link on there to the webinar that Sports England are running. And obviously, if you've got any questions at all, we at Midstream often help our customers as well with like what options there are out there. We do some looking around for them. So get in touch. At the end of this webinar, our details will be up on the screen. So if you've got any questions or there's anything we can help you with, please do get in touch. So next up.
Sorry, Sophie, could I just interject there?
Of course.
There was a question I just quickly saw that came up about planning. That's a really good question. I know for a fact the Small Grants Fund that Sport England have, that in many cases, and that one specifically, you do need to have either a letter acknowledging from your planning authority that there is no planning required, or if you do require planning, you obviously need to go through that process before you then kind of apply for a pot of funding. They won't obviously allow you to go through the process retrospectively on the condition that you might get planning. So again, planning is a really crucial bit, and it's definitely worth getting across the line before you even start looking at some of these funding pots.
Brilliant, thanks, Joe. And just on that, Sam, if you wouldn't mind just answering, like, how does someone know if they need planning?
So typically, as Joe mentioned, for the small grants fund and whatnot, you do. Joe's just stated it, but it can be dependent on your area. So if you're in a built-up area, it's always best to assume that you are going to need planning if you've got houses nearby and whatnot. If it is a retrofit, the likelihood is you're going to get through planning because you're actually 99 times out of 100, or you should always be decreasing your spill to the surrounding areas. The other thing as well is just getting in touch with the local planning authority and just finding out it doesn't take too long. We can support with any documentation that's required, and just basically find out, ask the question, and just double check everything.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Sam. We've got quite a few questions, so I'm afraid we don't get to answer them all live. What we will do is follow up with anyone whose questions we haven't answered. So the next question I have is, what are the standard lighting levels for hockey? Joe or Simon, if you don't mind answering that one.
Yep. Standard lighting lux levels, 350 lux for all competition, training and competition, and it is optional, and a lot of clubs would like 500 lux, but it is not a requirement for competition. But there are obviously many clubs that go to 500. For televised, it does tend to be 700, but that is a very rare occurrence.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And just on that, sorry, Sam, if you don't mind just answering this one, it's kind of along the same route. But FIH standards, what lighting levels do they require?
Yeah, so it's not just the lighting level, but it is 350 lux. There's also the uniformity, which is your spread of light. That has to be a certain level, which is 0.7, and then the min max, which is the highest kind of light level and the lowest light level, that needs to be 0.5. So they're the three things that we have to take into consideration. Amongst that, there's a lot of other boring science bits regarding the actual fittings themselves, but for the top level lux levels, it's the 350 and then the other 2 points I've just mentioned.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Sam. We've got another question. I think you covered this, but just to reiterate, does a retrofit require planning?
You wanted me to pick
Sam,
up?
yes, please.
Sorry, so not in all cases, no. If you're in an area where there's, as I say, the built up areas and whatnot, or if you need it for a specific funding option, but we've worked with many clubs where they're in a field or well out of the way, no housing nearby, and they've touched base with the planning authority to make sure that they don't, and it's gone ahead, no problem whatsoever. As Joe mentioned, it's just a letter saying, oh, you do not need planning. But I think it's always best to double check, especially if you've got an existing relationship with your local council stroke planning authority. There's no harm in double checking.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Sam. We've got a question. Sorry, go on.
Sorry. There was a previous question just before that around the FIH and the guidance. I think if you are on a education site, definitely get involved in looking and checking what lux levels. If the school is going to either do a retrofit and they're using the FIH guidance for that, as opposed to England Hockey's, then sometimes the FIH references 200 lux as a community level. That is because the FIH covers the entire world, and there are some parts of the world that are struggling with electricity and just supply. So the lux levels can be a lot lower as a requirement or an acceptable level to play under hockey. England Hockey's requirement, as Simon stated, is 350. So if you're aware of your school, because that's generally where we kind of pick up on bits and pieces, if we're involved, we can obviously kind of have a look over those lighting designs. I think if the school does it, I think it's definitely worth getting to know your school to make sure that you're getting the right lux levels and they're not just using the FIH guidance, which sometimes can be, in our case, a little bit misleading.
Thanks, Joe. That's really useful. And actually, I think what we'll do is we'll just include a link to the FIH guide as well in that follow-up email, just for anyone who wants to have a look.
Sorry, Sophie. Can I just? We're going backwards and forwards and yo-yoing. But the following question to that about planning, just one thing to make you aware is, if you are thinking about this, the other area that is really useful to get in contact with, as well as your local authority, is Sport England. They have planning managers that can support applications. Any planning application that comes through from a local authority gets automatically sent to Sport England, and then they come out to the local to the national governing bodies for comment. So it's just again being proactive, and you can find those people through us, through Joe or myself. That's not a problem, but we can put you in touch with Sport England, who will also support the process.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Simon. That's really useful. So we are at past, so I'm just going to do one more question, and then anything we haven't got to answer, because we've had quite a few, we'll follow up in an email. So I'm actually going to combine two questions into one. So we've got a question about maintenance, and typically how much does it cost to maintain LED floodlights? Sam, if you don't mind answering that one.
Yeah, of course. So maintenance, we suggest getting your fittings cleaned probably every 18 months to 2 years, depending on every 18 months to 2 years, dependent on location. 2 years is normally the norm, so to speak. But what we'd suggest in that is, or what is actually involved in that, is a lot less than the maintenance that you'd undertake on your current fitting. So as at the moment, as I've mentioned a few times, changing lamps, capacitors, igniters, everything like that, it's a lot more simple with the LED system. All we do is dependent on the mast itself. So either if it's a raise and lower mast or a static mast, we come in with the lowering tool, stroke cherry picker, and clean the fitting with basically a cloth and water, and just check all the connections and make sure everything's okay. Within that as well, we'd normally tie in a lux test. Just whilst we're on site, we might as well make sure everything's up to standard and ensure that you're still hitting those England Hockey and FIH standards.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Sam. I am just going to squeeze one more little question in there before we wrap up today. So we've got a question about warranty and the 10-year period. Sam, if you don't just mind answering. So Keith asks, in the 10-year warranty period, does that cover parts and labour? Or what does that cover?
So as a standard, we offer a 10-year warranty on the parts. That's not due to, or it's not subject to any maintenance agreement. However, we can offer warranty on the labour. If you were to take out the maintenance for the cleaning, checking the connections, we'd then warrant the labour as well, if that makes sense.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And thank you to everyone who's watching. I'm sorry that we haven't had time to answer all of your questions. We will follow up with people individually because there's quite a few in there and I don't want to keep you all evening. So thank you again for joining us. If you have any questions that you weren't able to ask, you are more than welcome to email either Sam or our colleague Patrick, who looks after a different part of the country to Sam. And obviously you can email any of us or you can reply to the follow-up email I send out in the morning with any questions you'd like us to answer. Thank you again for joining us. We really appreciate you giving up your evening and spending time with us. And we hope that you found this session helpful.